Good afternoon, everybody. We really appreciate you coming out today. My name's Daniel Schlegel. I'm the director of the History Center, and we've been looking forward to this for some time now. We've been really excited talking with Jim and preparing with everything. Just a couple quick little bits first. If everyone can pull out their cell phones and either turn them off or to silent, please. We just want to make sure we don't interrupt this great talk that we have planned. And aside from that, we are ready to go. We have two wonderful ladies that have taken care of our refreshments. Evelyn Quick here. I don't see Linda. Linda Stafford was here.
Yeah. Every time I see Linda, she has food.
But these two ladies took care of all the refreshments today, so afterwards, please make sure you enjoy the refreshments. They've done a wonderful job on this. Here we are. So these are the two ladies that did refreshments for us. So thank you,
Yay, Linda.
And Linda also did the... And Linda also did the flower arrangements in the back. So these were from her garden. So, but we were...
Linda's looking for volunteers.
Yes. Anyone that likes to weed, we can connect you with Linda on that one. But without any further ado, I'd like to introduce our special guest, Jim, and our office operations manager, Justin Robertson, who has been phenomenal in this whole process and has really handled a lot of this, and Justin's been absolutely wonderful. So I'd like to introduce our two speakers here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for coming out today. We really appreciate it, and we're very excited to have Jim Fielding, the celebrated corporate leader here today, and author of the USA Today National.
Get it right. Don't call it New York. Not New York Times yet.
Not New York Times.
We'll see how
USA
that pile
Today,
goes
people.
today. You know, everyone else.
Book All Pride, No Ego: A Queer Executive's Journey to Living and Leading Authentically. So, Jim, thank you so much for joining us.
Thrilled. So great.
We're so happy to have you here at the History Center, and you admit you've never been here before.
I know, it's embarrassing.
We're going to have to show you around.
I know.
For sure. But before we delve into any of the questions, can you tell us a little bit about your background as well as your career journey?
Yeah. I have to take a breath. Yeah, I mean, I'm a proud Toledo, Ohio native. I was born in Toledo, Ohio. My dad was a fireman. My mom was a retired radiology technician because I was born in the 60s and mom stayed at home, right? My journey really began when I came here to Indiana in 1983. I matriculated, I think we call it, in 1983. I majored in political science with an outside field in business. I thought I was going to go to law school. And when I graduated, my younger sister was in college, and my parents were like, there are no funds for law school. And a lot of you might remember in the 80s, they were telling us to go out and get practical real world experience before we went back to grad school. And so luckily, because I had that outside field in business, I was able to interview through the business placement office. But the only people that would interview political science graduates were pharmaceutical sales, insurance sales, or retail. And I had done retail, and I thought, oh, retail, like, that's a really good I'll do that for 2 years, because most retail training programs are 2 years. I'll do that for 2 years, I'll save some money, and then I'll go back to law school. And I got into retail and ended up loving it. So I went to Dayton Hudson Department Store Company in Minnesota. Before Macy's owned everything, they used to have different names. And I found out that I loved retail and that it was it was a good training program for me. And what I always loved about it is it combined my love for experiences and storytelling and customer service with business. Like, it balanced both sides of my brain. And I thought my career was going to be 100% retail. I thought it was, and it did in a way, but, and from Dayton Hudson, I got recruited to go to the Gap. In the good old days of the Gap, when everybody, kind of exactly the way I'm dressed now, I looked at what I was wearing and like, oh my God, I was wearing this in like 1989. Denim and khaki, yeah, denim and khaki. And, I tell everybody, like, that was getting an MBA in retail because the gap in the 80s and 90s was it. And I ran stores in Detroit and Chicago and then moved to San Francisco into corporate. And from there, I got recruited to a tiny little company in Lexington, Kentucky called the J. Peterman Company that most people know from Seinfeld. And I was basically Elaine and traveled around the world with John Peterman. It was it was very shocking going from San Francisco to Lexington, but traveling around the world with him was amazing. But probably the most amazing thing that happened is we went bankrupt. And that was an education. And so I was living in Lexington, Kentucky, needing a job. I was one of the last employees of J. Peterman, like literally turned the keys over to the bankruptcy
Now,
people.
what exactly was your role there?
I was the vice president of men's,
Okay.
which basically meant you went around the world with John, and John found things he liked, and then you'd buy them. Like, it was such a fascinating, after being in such a corporate structure, it was the most freeing creative job I think I ever had.
Because you were actually on the ground?
On the ground, we like literally, like this honestly happened. He would come into my cubicle and say, "I'm feeling Argentina." And I'd be like, okay.
And you knew
this
what
is
that
way
meant?
before, no, and I'd say, okay. And he'd say, "Here's like 3 people I know in Argentina." And this is way before cell phones and, we had computers, but it was like the microfiche kind of computers. And he'd be like, "I think you should put a trip together to Argentina and Uruguay. And we'll do," any of you that remember J. Peterman, those beautiful catalogs that had the watercolor in them and the stories, he's like, "We'll do a Argentina, Uruguay edition." I'm like, all right. And like the 3 people he would know would be like the ambassador to Argentina, some polo dude that had a polo farm, and like a gaucho, right? And I'd be tracing them down and saying, "John Peterman wants to come." And we'd go for 4 weeks, completely immersive. John traveled with like those old steamer trunks, because when you travel with him, you had to bring horse riding gear, a tuxedo, like it was the most bizarre thing. And, but it was amazing. And I would travel, I'm embarrassed to say this, but you guys understand. I would travel with like $50,000 in cash in various places throughout my luggage and on my body. And we
Tucked in your shoes? and
yeah,
stuff?
shoes and like a security belt, and we literally we'd be walking through, Montevideo, Uruguay, and he'd find some earrings he liked, and then it was my job to like somehow in broken English buy the earrings, like however many earrings this woman had. And I'd leave her my card. It's such an old time. I mean, it was so beautiful. I'd leave her my card and $1,000. And then, like 3 weeks after I get home, the distribution center would call me, which was underneath us, and say, "There's some random earrings from Montevideo. Can you come down and tell us what these are?" And I'd have to go down and give them like a SKU number, like a style number, and then we'd paint them. We'd do the watercolor, and then we'd write the story about them. And it was incredible. It was so authentic, a word I love, and I wished it could have gone on forever, but it was not the biggest money-making venture, because we'd sell like 4 earrings, right? Like you realized it didn't really scale. So after the bankruptcy, I went to work for Land's End in Madison, Wisconsin, because I wanted to continue to learn the catalog industry. And then really the second half of my career that most people know me for started because I got recruited to go to Disney, and I spent 12 years at Disney, starting in the Disney catalog, but ending up as president of Disney stores worldwide. And that's where most people, if you've ever heard of me or people in the industry say, "Oh, he was president of Disney store." So I did that for 4 years, and we opened and revamped online and opened Disney stores. We had Disney stores in 12 countries around the world, amazing teams in London and China and Japan and in Los Angeles. And from
Did you
there,
have to go to every single one of them? You would go to
I
London
traveled
and you would
so much.
see
It was
It
was great for my professional life. It was not the best, when you read the book, it was not the best part of my personal life,
Right.
but I was on the road. I was on the road constantly, and I loved every minute of it. Our tagline was the best 30 minutes of a family's day. And I really, working for Disney really showed me the power of a global brand, because we had a gorgeous store in Venice, Italy, like literally not much bigger than this room. But watching the kids' faces in Venice, Italy was the same as watching them, in Times Square in New York, the same as watching them in Tokyo. It really was a magical time. I loved that job. And then I became the CEO of Claire's stores. So anybody that got their ears pierced at Claire's, many people.
Auckland did.
Yeah, yes, and that got me back to the Midwest. That got me back to Chicago. And really, that's when I got back to Chicago in 2012, it's really when I started to re-engage with the university. And I got super involved with the university because I was close again. Living in California, it was hard to really stay connected to campus, but being in Chicago was pretty easy.
And you mean Indiana University?
Indiana University, right. So I got, much more involved in the Alumni Association, and I was at a point in my life where I could become a donor, and so I started to, think about how I wanted to use my money, and so I did Claire's for almost 3 years, then got pulled back to Hollywood by a man named Jeffrey Katzenberg, who had a company called DreamWorks. And very important guy, yes. And he had bought an internet startup, a multi-channel network called Awesomeness TV that was like the YouTube channels, like the beginning, like early of the creators. And I had an incredible run with him. Jeffrey, I was afraid of Jeffrey, I'll be honest with you. Jeffrey was legendary. Like his quote was, if you're late for work on Saturday, don't bother showing up on Sunday. That was like a direct quote of his. I got the softer, gentler Jeffrey. He was a grandfather by the time I got there, and I think it changed him. But I learned so much from him, and we did such a good job. We got bought by NBC Universal, and so I was out of a job, and I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. I thought I was going to consult, and Jeffrey, God bless him, called me and said, I don't know what you want to do, but I think you should have lunch with Stacey Snider. It's like a very Hollywood story. It's like, I think you should have lunch with Stacey Snider, who was the chairman of 20th Century Fox Studios. She was one of the first women to be the chairman of a studio in Hollywood. And I said, great, because I'd love to consult for her, and I thought she'd be a great first client, if I could put her on my business card. And by the end of the lunch, I was working for her at 20th Century Fox and had a great run there, but then we got bought by Disney in a weird circle of life, Lion King moment.
So then you were back at Disney.
Yeah, but they didn't give me a job.
Okay.
So then I made this huge announcement to the industry that I was taking for the first time in my life a sabbatical, and you guys are smart, you'll remember the dates, and that was September of 2019. And I said, I'm taking 6 months off, I'll be back in April. And then this little COVID thing happened, and all of a sudden, like I was at home in California with my dogs, isolated, and nobody was working in an office, nobody was hiring. And really then, and my friend Alec, who drove me here today from Indianapolis, then, the last 4 or 5 years have just been crazy. Like everything changed. The book came out of that, the consulting work, everything came out of that, really that period of isolation.
Yeah, that's okay. So you completely anticipated my next question, which was, of course, like, what made you write this book? That it's not only about your professional journey, but it's about your personal journey as well.
Yeah,
and so what inspired you to share your story?
Well, I had been a journaler my whole life. So the first thing that happened was, and many of you might remember this, when we were at home, like you were kind of looking for, like you could only watch so much TV, right? And there was only so much. And I thought, you know what? I want to get out all my journals, because I think I had them in all these other places. I'd moved. And so I went to Target, fully masked and gloved. You guys remember that day. And I got one of those plastic tubs, one of those big plastic tubs with the clips. And I thought, I'm going to put all my journals in one place. But of course, I started reading them, right? And they had started when I was like 13. And I had them up. I still journal today. And so that was interesting, because I was like, I didn't even recognize some of the things I had written. I didn't remember everything, obviously, it was in the journals. And then really what spurred the book was the Don't Say Gay bill in Florida.
Yes.
And you and I talked about this.
Yeah.
And I was so incensed by the Don't Say Gay bill. And I was more mad at Disney as a Disney alum for not fighting the Don't Say Gay bill or saying anything against it, that I wrote a LinkedIn post. And this is like, be careful what you write on LinkedIn, because it went viral without me knowing it was going to go viral. Meaning, like, all of a sudden I was like at 100,000 views. And I started to get contacted through LinkedIn by like the New York Times and Wall Street Journal and publishers who said, you know, they wanted me to go on, they basically wanted me to fight with Disney, honestly, and be like on record as a former Disney executive. I didn't do that, but through that, they asked me if I wanted to start writing articles and if I wanted to start being a source. So there was a lot of articles back then where it was like an unnamed former Disney executive. That was me, but I would never put my name down. And a couple of the publishers that contacted me said, I think you have a book in you. Like, I like the way you write. And so they said to me, write a treatment and send it to us. And Justin, I told you this before, I didn't know what a book treatment was. So again, God bless the internet, I Googled what's a book treatment. And, you know, they're like 10 pages and an outline and all that. And so I did it. And I ended up with 2 or 3 different publishers that were interested, but I went with Wiley because, I mean, they were known in the industry. They're one of the top 5. But the editor that had shown interest said, at the time I was 56, she said, I want 56-year-old Jim to write the book that 26-year-old Jim wished he had.
Okay.
And so she basically gave me permission, and any of you that have read the book or listened to the book, it is like I wrote it to myself.
Yeah, yeah. And that was, I mean, when I read it, I was like, I wish I had this book years ago.
Yeah.
So it's, what exactly do you mean by all pride and no ego?
Yeah, I love his questions. Well, I'll be honest with you. It was, for about 80% of its life, it was called Moments of Truth. And then former National Security Advisor Robert Mueller put out his book called Moments of Truth. And the publisher called me, his Moments of Truth were much bigger than mine. And the publisher called me and said, that name's taken. And I had a panic, and between the editor and, so, you know, I had my executive editor, and then I had like a grammatical editor. That's the best part about being with a big publisher. You have lots of different versions of editors. And we did a couple Zoom calls, and the one editor said, what really comes through in your writing is this, you know, this journey you were on to kind of fall back in love with yourself and this humility that you have. And I said, yeah, my whole life has been all pride, no ego, right? And she was like, oh, wait a minute. And she like did a search, and she's like, we can do it. And I was like, and then we had a big debate, honestly, and a lot of you in this room will understand it, because it was like, well, if I just put all pride, no ego, no one's gonna know what it is. And she's like, no, we need a subtitle. And so we worked really hard on the subtitle, you know, because I said it's a journey. And the book is organized around 10 leadership life lessons, and it's basically memoir-ish in that I tell personal and professional stories around those. But the subtitle was a huge source of discussion, because I put the word queer on the title and the flag in the graphic. And that means that to this day, I'm still not carried in some states. There's some bookstores.
Really?
Yeah.
Seriously?
Lots of stores in the
states?
South. Florida right now.
Oh.
I'm almost nowhere in
Wow.
Florida except like Key West and Miami. Imagine that. I'm going to Tallahassee August 31st for an event, and they're bringing in the book specially for that. And then Mississippi, Alabama, you can kind of guess. A couple places. I've been to Texas, but a lot of people in Texas wouldn't carry it.
Wow.
Because it had the flag and the word queer on the cover. And so we had a big debate. I said, if that's like, it was hard, because I'm like, am I completely marginalizing myself and
Right.
not, I want this book in people's hands. And they're like, no, you've got to be authentic. And so Wiley's been extremely supportive of getting me out on the road I'm not a banned book. Like, I would never say that. I'm not in the band. I'm just a not carried book, if that makes sense. And by the way, it's America, and bookstore owners have the choice whether to carry the book or not. I will not I don't go and argue with them. But it's interesting how blunt they are, because I have called some and said, I'm just curious on why you wouldn't carry the book. Do you not carry business? Because it really is a business leadership book. And they're like, no, we don't carry queer books. And I'm like, oh, okay, thank you. You know, it's a different time, but
Yeah, actually, I was going to skip
Yeah.
down to some.
Yeah,
because
move around.
I wanted to touch on this from the time that you came out in the 1980s to now, and how have you seen the landscape change? Because it has really changed. But then
For
now
sure.
when you tell me things like this, I feel like we're going backwards. Because I feel like even in the 80s, we had Ruby Fruit Jungle, you know what I mean? I mean,
No, for
I didn't
sure.
live in Texas, so I don't know. But
I mean,
I've
I
had it.
think, I've said lately, because I've been on the road a lot. I mean, the book came out last August, and so I've done, quite a few of these. And I mean, I say some days I wake up and I'm like, is it 2024 or like 1964? Like,
Right.
there's some days I'm like, oh, we're kind of backwards here. But the answer to your question is, Justin, it completely depends on geography, right? I mean, I think if you're on the coast, frankly, if I'm in Massachusetts or New York or New Jersey, California, it's improved tremendously where I really built my career. It's funny because 3 years ago I moved to Atlanta. Atlanta is extremely liberal and welcoming and inclusive. The rest of Georgia is Marjorie Taylor Greene, right? So, and by the way, her district is like 45 minutes from where I live. So, I don't take it for granted. Like, and I think unfortunately geography really influences what's happening in our community. And there's today, over 500 pieces of anti-LGBTQ legislation
Exactly.
on the
Yeah.
docket.
500.
Over 500.
Yeah.
And that's city, state, national.
A lot of them are getting defeated, though.
We've had some real wins.
Yeah.
We've had some losses, but it's opened a dialogue. And to be honest, the women's rights issue opened the dialogue first. I think with the overturning of Roe versus Wade, women's rights, women's access to health, choice, just kind of slid right into gay rights.
Well, so looking ahead, do you feel optimistic or pessimistic about where LGBTQ rights are
Choice
going?
C, realistic. Like, I'm an optimist by nature. And when I spend a lot of time on college campuses lately, and I spend time with young people, it gives me a lot of hope, but they're not voting enough. Like, I want them to get out and vote. I like the rest of you. I mean, we're reliving 2020 in a lot of ways. That wasn't a high point in our history for any of us. So I'm nervous about that. Earlier this week, I had knee surgery, so you've seen me hollowing around. I have a new knee. I'm bionic on my right side now. And my first trip was to Washington, D.C. I spent 2 days at a CEO summit that CNBC hosted, and it was amazing. We had Mike Johnson, we had Nancy Pelosi, we had amazing speakers. And at the end of so there was 100 CEOs and invited guests, and they were doing these polls that we would answer on our phone. I think I'm allowed to say this, it doesn't matter. I know I'm being taped. They asked on the poll, who do you think, after all these presentations, all these discussions we were in for 2 days, who's gonna win the presidency? And it was like Trump or Biden, and it literally was 50-50. And literally, like, so if there was 102 people voting, it was like 50%, 50%. So, and I think that's the country we live in right now. I think it's very polarized. I feel it. When I did this event in San Antonio, I was picked up at my hotel by security and moved to the bookstore, and they wanded everybody that came into the bookstore. And then there was a dinner afterwards. They put me in a car and went with me and the security sat with me at the table next to us. It was like Secret Service, kind of. But they didn't tell me that because I think they thought I wouldn't have come. Of course I would have still come, but that was...
Were you surprised to have security?
Oh, God, yeah.
That
Like
doesn't
me?
happen to
Like
you
why?
all the time.
No, like why? Why would anybody come to a bookstore? Like who's Jim Fielding? Why would anybody come to a bookstore? But they've had a lot of problems in San Antonio anytime the community gathers, and we had I don't know, 50, 55 people at that event. So it's the world we live in.
Wow.
And I think that's what makes me realistic.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm never going to be pessimistic. I'm too much of an optimist, but I also don't live with rose-colored glasses. So
Yeah. Okay. That's very good. Thank you. The theme of coming out and living authentically is central to your book. Why do you believe it's crucial for individuals, especially LGBTQ plus individuals, to embrace their truth and to live authentically?
yeah, I mean, this is a loaded question, but I mean, the first thing I say, and I get asked this a lot, and people DM me now through my Instagram or LinkedIn. It is a completely personal decision. My book and these events is not about people kicking open the closet door. The first thing you have to take into account is your physical and psychological safety and your financial security. And in many cases, people's family lives or work don't allow them to come out. So I didn't write the book to be like, I want everybody to be free to be themselves, and I'll talk about that, but I'm also super conscious that that is a very personal and private decision, and I would never force anybody to do it. However, I use my own story in that I knew I was gay since I was 6 or 7. I didn't know what it was called. I just knew I was different, and in the family that I was raised in, I felt broken. And I felt wrong, and I tried to fix myself many different ways. I tried to get help. I wanted to change because I thought, again, 1970s and 80s, I thought in order to be happy, I had to be straight. I had to get married and have kids and a white picket fence and a golden retriever because that's the representation that we had. And I started to manifest personally at like 24 and 25, like older people issues, blood pressure, ulcers, and I would go to the doctor because again, Western medicine, I wanted a pill, right? I'm like, just give me a pill, I'll be better, right? And they'd ask me, they'd do the blood test and all that kind of stuff, and they'd be like, why do you think your blood pressure's up? Do you have a lot of stress? And I'm like, oh no, I have no stress, right? But I was living a completely double life.
Yeah.
And so I was manifesting, my body was basically physically rejecting the life that I was living. And, my sister, I wrote in the book, my sister forced me out because she was getting married and she asked my roommate to be in the wedding. And she said, are you gonna tell mom and dad why he's in the wedding or am I? And she gave me a deadline. And that really, gave me the oomph. But as I write the book, my dad didn't talk to me for a year after I came out, like literally one solid year. I mean, he wrote me letters, not nice letters, but I had no communication with him.
Was he in denial?
Yeah, I think it's funny. The benefit of hindsight, the one thing about aging that's great is wisdom. When my dad and I finally reconciled and had the conversation, it really was him being protective. And when he finally opened up and he said, I was just so afraid for you. Because I think those of you, and I know I have peers in this room, it was one thing to come out, but coming out in the 80s, they instantly thought you were HIV positive and had AIDS, right? So I think he was afraid. He said to me, I was afraid you were going to get sick. I was afraid your career was going to be limited. I was afraid you were going to be unhappy. So in his weird dad way, he was being protected, but he was 80s dad, a product, he was born in the 40s. He didn't express, I was somehow supposed to get that by osmosis, right? He didn't say that to me. If we would have had that conversation when I first told him, it would have saved us 12 months of angst and a lot of pressure on my mom. Because again, pre-cell phone, to talk to my mom, I had to call my sister, who then would call mom and say, call Jimmy. Because if I called at home, he hung up on me. So I caused issues in my parents' relationship too. And so and it was almost like all the negative self-talk I had told myself from 7 or 8 was coming true because I was hurting my family. Like I could see what I was doing. And we were very close. It was only me and my sister, mom and dad. We were a tight unit. And all that negative self-talk I did was like manifesting itself. Like I was causing a rupture in the family and putting a ton of pressure on my sister and mom. And I finally manned up, honestly, and flew. I was living in California or Chicago at that point, and my parents were living in Florida, and I flew to Florida, and my mom knew I was coming, my dad didn't. And I stayed in their house. Like I went to the guest room, and I basically looked at him, and he looked at me, and I said, I'm not leaving until we talk. And like the first 24 hours were pretty horrible, but slowly we talked. And then I write in the book, by the end of my dad's life, he could have been the president of PFLAG. Like he literally leapt. Like, and so you can teach an old dog new tricks.
Yeah, so he evolved. And it wasn't just your family at that time. That was the way society was. And that's why I think it's a little concerning when you see us going backwards. I mean, not a little, very concerning, because it's just very difficult for people to live a life like that. And, you know, it affects their family even though your family loves you.
Totally. And for me, when I look at my career trajectory, it got better when I fully embraced who I was. Like, because I was then bringing, which is the whole message in the book, Evelyn knows, is when I was bringing my full self, my most authentic self, then the company was getting the best of me. Absolutely. When I wasn't having to worry about changing the pronouns or saying that I went to the Pride Parade on the weekend, right? What did you do this weekend? Oh, I went to church. No, I mean, like I went to the Pride Parade. So, but not having to make up stories, right? I mean, I was living the double life. And I think because of that, I was able to be more creative, more productive, more everything at work. And I just started to move. I could feel it.
You were just allowed to be more you.
Yeah.
Something I thought that was really interesting in your book, too, though, is that you were a singer, right? And you performed in theater and all this, but then you were really good at it. But
it made me cry. This makes me cry. But it's why I've been to like 200 Broadway musicals now. I mean, I'm a patron of the arts. The bullies took it away from me.
Yeah.
I was really good. I don't know if I would have made Broadway, but I was in the choir. I did all the school musicals until 5th grade. Always had the solos. Like, everybody was fine with it. And then 5th grade, and many of you remember, like the mean girls start and the bullying starts, all that, puberty shit starts. And if you were in theater or band, I mean, band fag, theater fag, right? And I was like, oh my God, they don't need any more ammunition. I already had a feminine voice. I had feminine mannerisms. I was super conscious of it. And I thought, I just have to stop. But I write in the book, like they took it away from me. And so then by the time that I felt good enough about myself, like I would do gay men's chorus and stuff, but by that time I was an adult. But it's why I'm so supportive of local arts. A lot of my philanthropy is local theater companies. And then I support theater wherever I live, Atlanta or LA, but I go to New York, I go to London. Like I'm literally, I don't know, I'm sure maybe some other people here, like literally when they announced Audra McDonald was doing Gypsy, I was the one who the tickets went on sale at 10 a.m. I canceled everything else. And at 9:57 started going on
Swift.
Yeah, going on Ticketmaster. Well, it's like Audra McDonald.
Yeah.
Most Tonys ever in the most amazing role ever. Like I would go see Audra McDonald sing The Phone Book, right? And so literally I said to God bless my fiance, I was like, December 10th, we're going to be in New York. And he was like, oh, okay.
What a great role.
And I said, if you don't want to go, I'll find someone to take your ticket. No, I mean but that's because I love live theater.
Yeah.
I love live theater.
Well, I was wondering if you weren't in that sort of social situation where you were being bullied and everything, do you think you would have gone into theater? Would your life taken a completely different
I mean, I think I would have kept up with. I don't know if I was good at. Like, we all know that's like, am I going to be the NFL quarterback, right? I mean, I don't know if it would have been my career. I think I would have done it throughout high school and college. Like, I think I would have done productions, and I would have been in maybe even, like IU has so many amazing jazz chorals and things like that. I think I probably would have done it. I don't know if I would have been good enough to have a career at it. We'll never know, right?
Yeah.
But I would have kept it up myself. For sure.
Well, you had brought up the bullies and stuff, and I think that that's a really important thing because
The hardest chapter, chapter 3, learning 3, learning 3.
it's in your book you give the excellent advice of don't let anyone dim your light,
Right.
which I found very powerful. And can you talk about what that means to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think of bullying of like dimming your light, and I had an incredible executive coach at Disney who basically gave me that phrase, and I think we all have a light, we all have a talent, we all have superpowers, we all have our essence, right, that makes us who we are, and you basically want to burn your light as brightly as you want to. And I felt that the bullies in elementary school, middle school, high school for me were asking me to be something that I wasn't, asking me to turn down the gymnasts, basically, right? And then what I realized in writing the book was there was actually times in corporate America where I was bullied, and whether that was by a board of directors or by a boss who didn't like me so much. And when I was struggling with Disney, because again, I told you my favorite job ever was president of Disney Store. I worked at Disney 12 years, which was so rare, and I had one boss for 11 years who was unbelievable. His name's Andy Mooney. Ironically, he was at the same summit in Washington I was. We didn't know we were going to be there. And then I got a boss, and I'll say his name because it's in the book, Bob Chapek, who ended up becoming the CEO of Disney. I got him. Bob Chapek and I were literally, I said black, he said white. I said salt, he said pepper. We could not get on the same sheet of music. And I had this executive coach, and I was going to my executive coaching session, and I was like, what do I do? What do I do? Like, I'm trying to learn how to play. I've been doing this game for 11 years at Disney, and I've been rewarded for it. And now I feel like the guidebook has changed, the rule book has changed. And my coach's name was David Oldfield, and he said, Jim, he's asking you to dim your light. You realize that? And I was like, oh. And he said, so you have a choice. Either dim your light and try and make it work, or leave. And because he said he's not going to change, and the corporation isn't going to change. And that's when I left. And I resigned from Disney with 2 years left on a contract, which no one does, because contracts in California were golden. Like, you basically had to rob a bank to get out of to have them get rid of you. And I couldn't do it because it was weird. I started to manifest. I was losing weight. I was starting to have migraines. Like, it was that same, my body was, and I totally shielded it from my people. They didn't know. So I was like living this double life again, because I was getting attacked by this new boss, feeling insecure, feeling bullied, but having to wear a shiny, happy face for the 5,000 employees at Disney Store. And that dichotomy just was really draining.
So you're sort of back where you were in high school, and probably had.
And it brought up a lot of that,
Yeah.
for any of you know, it brought up a lot of that like wounded child syndrome, and like it started to feel again like being back 13 or 14 years old, and that was a horrible feeling.
And did it affect your health? Yeah.
100%.
Okay. What would you advise people to do then who are being bullied? Should they leave?
Well, yeah, no, I don't think, I tried a lot of stuff before I left. It wasn't like it was like, oop, I'm out, like a light
Right.
switch. I went to HR, I documented stuff, I tried, but I think, at the end of the day, Disney's an incredible place to work, and we create magic for everybody, but it's a corporation right there, and I wasn't going to get any special treatment, right? And he was the boss. Bob was the boss, so I was either going to get on his program, or I needed to take it somewhere else. And it was hard, and I won't go into it, but if you read the book, even the way they handled my resignation was, and I write about in the book, was bullying. Because they basically sent me away for 3 weeks and then called me and said, okay, come and clean out your office tomorrow. It was horrible. But as I look at my life, I literally, that was such a low point in my life. But when I look at what's happened, I've been gone 12 years now from Disney. Like, my life's been amazing since then. So I just had to believe in myself and believe that everything happens for a reason. And the former Disney, there's a lot of former Disney alums, and we get together a lot because when you're in there, it's almost cult-like, I'll be honest with you. If anybody's worked at Disney, it's almost like you got pixie dust in your blood. And you think it's the only place to work. And then you leave and you're like, oh, okay, there's other places to work besides Disney.
Yeah. So how did you overcome that?
Therapy, friends, family. There might have been some alcohol involved. No, I mean, it took me a while. It was green, but I also found a job I love. That's when I went to Claire's, right? So I threw myself in to something new. You know, I moved from California to Chicago because I needed that geographic split. You know, I don't know if I was really ever fully over it. I think writing the book actually was pretty cathartic for me on this part. And going back to LA, I've done quite a bit of stuff in LA, and Bob Iger, who's the current CEO of Disney, I have a ton of respect for. He's in the book. I sent him a book when it came out, and he called me, and I've seen him since the book came out. So it's good. It was healing in a way. I have not talked to Bob Chapek. I don't think I could.
One part of your book that I found sort of amusing was you described your experience working with an all-white heterosexual male board at Claire's. And that's a retailer that's focused
all these
on
women in the
accessories for
audience. No
young
offense,
girls.
white men. No offense, white men in the audience.
So this is not a demographic.
Okay, you guys
is
know
really
what Claire's
reflective.
is, right? People know Claire. It is primarily girls, jewelry, and accessories. And I'm not talking fine, high-end heirloom, right? This is disposable 3 for $20 earrings, right? It's where you get your ears pierced. And we had a 7-member board. It was 6 60-ish white finance men who, because it had been a leveraged buyout, private equity people, right? And me. And I was like, okay. And so I had a really good first year there, did a lot of great things. There was some low-hanging fruit. And so I went to the board and I said, can we expand the board from 7 to 9? Because there's no magic. Evelyn knows this. She works with a ton of companies. There's no magic board size other than the board should be odd so that no votes are even, right? And I said, I'd love to expand the board to 9. And I specifically would like those 2 seats to be women of color from marketing, retail, like a sociologist who studies women, right? Like, because there's no voice of our customer in this room. And every decision we make in this room is financially driven. You know, what's the ROI? What's the ROI? What's the ROI? And I said, I'm in here talking about how the demographics changing, and you guys will laugh, but I'm like, I was in there talking about Taylor Swift, because Taylor Swift was coming on the scene, and what she meant, like female power. And then we did a deal. Katy Perry's, one of her last tours was the Roar album, and we did a deal to sponsor her tour, and she did a jewelry line for us. And they thought I was crazy, and the thing blew out, right? But everything with that board was a fight because their filter was completely 60-year-old straight white finance dudes, which I did not think was healthy for the brand. And by the way, after I left, that private equity firm ended up putting them in bankruptcy, and they're now owned, which actually helped them. They're now owned by new owners, and they shed some stores and stuff. And I looked at their board, and it's half female now. It's so funny. Like,
So do you think it's important that a board represents an organization's identity or mission?
1,000%. I mean, it should have been a majority female board. It should have been the men, like, because I think that the board needs to represent, not necessarily like the demographics, but at least the knowledge of who your consumer is, right? So I'm not saying a straight white man or a gay white man can't understand teenage girls. I mean, but I think if you're from Wall Street, you don't really understand teenage girls, right? I think if you're in marketing or retail, but again, I think representation matters. And I think because I had worked at Disney, and some of you will understand this, I never really interacted with the board at Disney. A little bit when I had to make presentations to the board about the revamp of Disney Store. But when you're the CEO, like, you report to the board of directors, and that's your primary communication is with the board of directors. And I do think representation matters, and I do think, retail is hard and competitive, and malls were dying, and e-commerce was coming on, and the TikTok was coming on, and YouTube, and all this stuff was happening. And my board was oblivious. It was like they were just in a bubble. And I needed more people on that board that understood that.
Mm-hmm. Great. One thing to go back to your relationship with your dad, or sort of to touch on that, or with your family and stuff. Yeah. Something about your book that also really moved me was you talk about having chosen families. And that personally has always been very important to me. And I think it's very important to the queer community to always have chosen families. Yeah. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about that, because you did say you came to IU and you went to Bloomington, and here you found your family, which I thought was also really
wonderful.
I
mean, I even went farther. I mean, I said, I think Bloomington saved my life. I think I had a couple really dark times in high school, and yeah, I mean, I'm lucky because I'm blessed with a great natural family, and once my dad and I got over stuff. But not everybody in the queer community is. I mean, many people, just by embracing themselves, have to sever from their family for whatever reason. Sometimes religion's involved, other stigma, things like that. And the queer community, the history of the queer community, and I think many marginalized communities, by the way, I think women are a great example of this, like, support groups, right? But the concept of found family or chosen family in the queer community really comes from the ballroom culture, really comes from New York and the ball. If any of you watched Pose, and the houses, exactly. The houses over here on the bunk wall.
Exactly. Right? No, that was my chosen family.
The house of raging women over here, right?
Yes.
But I have an incredible found family, and I talk about it in the book, and I just saw some of them this week. Again, fate, right? I lived in Teeter Quad, Boys and Four, right? Toledo, Ohio. Nobody from my high school was here. There wasn't any picking a roommate. I was assigned Kurt Malloy from Gas City, Indiana. That's like a whole nother story, right? But you guys remember in the old IU dorms, I mean, you went there, the phones that flipped, the flip phones, right? The guy on the other side of flip phone was a guy named...
The one,
remember how they were in that box? They were in that
box
box with the door. Yeah. So 4 of you were sharing a phone. This is, again, any of you youngins, before cell phones, before pagers, like we had landlines. And you lived or died by that landline, and you had to share it with 4 people. And you would knock on the door because you wanted to use the phone, and it was on a turntable.
In a box.
Yeah, it was in a wood box. Right?
In between
2 rooms.
Yeah.
But you could see the other person. Like,
you could look into the room.
And so the guy, this is the best. So the guy who's in my phone box on the other side was a guy named Mark Klein, and he was a sophomore. I was a freshman. And he said, hey, I'm your phone mate, whatever. Came over, introduced himself. Okay, I was 18, August 1983. He's one of my best friends today. Okay, so this is so funny about chosen family. So then I go down to orientation for the dorm, right? My name is Jim Fielding. I sat next to Mary Field, who was from Glenview, Illinois, just a sweet girl. I was like, oh, it's so nice to meet you. Mary Field is married to Mark Klein and has 4 children that I'm godfather to 2 of them and have been to all of their high school graduations and college graduations. And I have this nucleus of 12 people from IU that we are just ride or dies. And they're people that I met day one. And they were the first people I came out to, besides my family. You know, they love me unconditionally, and it's incredible that I have them. And I would not be where I am today if they weren't in my life, for sure.
That's great. Back in the early 80s, you were here in 83, I think. Did you feel that Bloomington was a supportive place to be in general?
Yeah, it's so funny because it's not like they advertise it, right? I mean, I picked up on it when my dad was the one that I went on college visits with, right? And it wasn't like, again, I feel most of you guys are more in my age group. I see the youngins too, but it's not like we had college night. At Whitmer High School in Toledo, Ohio, there was no college night, right? There was no college counseling. Our counseling department was dealing with truants and drug addicts and, it wasn't about pre-college. So really how you learned about college was the mail you got, right? Because you took the PSAT or the SAT and then you started getting these brochures. And my parents didn't go, they went to 2-year schools. So the whole idea of a 4-year residential thing was kind of foreign to them. But I had some older friends, and my dad said, because everything with my dad was a budget, I could go on 5 visits. Like we had the money for 5 visits. None of them could be on an airplane. Like he set rules, right? So I basically had a geographic area, and I did not want to go to school close to home because I think I knew that I was going to be exploring. And I was afraid my mom would show up or my dad, right? It had to be far enough away that they had to give me notice. So my first choice, honestly, was the University of Michigan. However, the University of Michigan is only 45 minutes from Toledo. And I was like, ugh, and I had this high school teacher, Elaine Kuntz, who said, I think you should look at Indiana University. And I was like, really? And she hadn't gone here. She was from Indiana. She was from up by South Bend. And she goes, yeah, I think you'd be great. Indiana would be great for you. And I remember my dad and I drove here, and it was like 5.5 or 6 hours. And I was thinking the whole time, the longer it ticked, I was feeling better, right? And we drove onto campus, and I was like, oh my God, this is what college is supposed to look like. And I felt an energy here. I loved the tour. I loved the majors. I loved the limestone. That's why I get kind of emotional. I can't believe I've never been in here, but the beautiful limestone. And I knew after that tour, I was coming to Indiana. My dad and I made a deal in the car ride on the way home that he would pay in-state tuition, like pretending like I had gone to Ohio State and I had to make up the difference. And then I get here, and there was articles about being one of the most LGBT, it wasn't called LGBTQ plus back then, it was LG or LGB maybe, that we were always like in the top 10, and I didn't realize it, but yes, I felt it immediately. And it did allow me to explore, which I think is what you're supposed to do in college. And so I didn't know it. It's not why I picked Indiana, but the minute I got here, I felt it.
You felt more free and more yourself.
I mean, I struggled the whole time through college because I was still kind of living that double life, and I was still thinking like, I called myself, okay, I'll just be honest with you guys, because then they'll ask me questions. I called myself bisexual because that was easy, right? I'm like, that was easy. Like, I'm bisexual. I just like people. I was like Anne Heche and Ellen DeGeneres, right? I liked people. And I dated men and I dated women here. Openly dated women, closetedly dated men. And I was in a fraternity. And I mean, I did all the things I thought I was supposed to do. And then I went to Denmark. Denmark was unbelievable. And then when I came back, there was no going back. It was like,
That's great. Let's talk about success and happiness. In your opinion, what are some key ingredients for achieving both in life and career?
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, I think the key for me was accepting myself unconditionally and loving myself unconditionally. Like, it sounds a little bit like RuPaul. I write about that in the book. Like, if you can't love yourself, how the hell are you gonna love anybody else? But I really do think that. Like, when I finally shed all the expectations and embraced myself and started to feel that I was exactly who I was supposed to be, exactly doing what I was supposed to do. And whether that meant spiritually, if I was talking to God or I was talking to, my mother or, my friends, where I had to do that first. And I think that's been the key to me is, I think going through the experimentation, getting to know yourself, what do you like, what do you don't like? I do think that's part of growing up, that's part of maturation. But I think it's literally, and I think it's accepting all, like, I'm good at art and marketing, I'm horrible at math, like accepting all that stuff, right? And that it's your formula, it's your superpowers that you're trying to get in touch with.
What role do you think passion plays in finding fulfillment and success in your professional life?
I think it should play a big role. I think initially, especially for my generation, I think the first jobs I did weren't necessarily about passion. It was about I needed a paycheck, I needed benefits, I needed stability. I think the longer, and again, as I traveled around the world, one of my favorite concepts is the Japanese concept of ikigai, I-K-I-G-A-I. I might say it wrong for any of you that speak Japanese. But they say life in harmony, ikigai, is the combination of, it's the intersection of 4 concentric circles, what you're good at, what you can get paid for, what you're passionate about, and what the world needs. And that became a real driving force for me as I got older, is like trying to find my ikigai. Where, yes, I could live a lifestyle that I wanted, but I was hopefully making a difference and I was passionate about it. And I think, what I'm doing now, Alec and I were talking about this on the way down, I'm changing my life again. Like, I've gone through this pivot the last 3 or 4 years. I'm a partner in a small independent media company in New York. That's my job. We make film and television and documentaries, and I'm really proud of what we do. And I've been consulting for some amazing companies, but I told my partners in February this year that I was done this December. So like, I'm on my end. And the reason is because being out on the road and doing this and doing corporate speaking engagements, and I got a deal to write a second and a third book, that's what I want my life to be now. And I was doing this more like a side hustle, and it's a full-time job for me, and it fills my soul. Like, it's the passion piece, and I had to say to my partners, which was not easy, my business partners, it's not filling my soul anymore. I love what we do, and I'm proud of it, but I'm not passionate about it anymore, and it feels like a job, and I don't want it to feel like a job.
That's great. That's wonderful. Again, this has gone by so fast, but I think that we're out of time.
Yeah.
Almost for the
I know, we should take questions, right?
But yeah,
Questions. And then I'll
absolutely.
sign.
So
Anybody that brought a book or wants a book, I'll sign.
So now we'd like to open the floor up to anybody who has any questions for Jim. I still had tons of questions for you, but
Yeah.
this was great.
Sure. Yes.
Speaking of this intersection of these issues in the corporate world, what would you advise Target
Yes.
to do to address the...
Target. I should start this by saying I'm a Target fan and shopper. And last year, when they really got a lot of problems, I actually wrote an opinion piece to try and support them, because Target has been an ally of our community for a long time. Target was one of the first companies to offer domestic partner benefits. They'd actually celebrated Pride. They have an employee resource group. And I said to them in this letter, which I did send to their C-suite, the mistake you made was when the far right came after you, and there was physical altercations in their store and people pulling down the signage and stuff. But you kowtowed to them, and you didn't go get us on the left. You didn't go get the progressives. And Then you pissed us off because you either took it off the floor or you put it in the back of the store, like next to the dog food and the fish food, right? And we were like, okay, well, if you're not serious about it, then just don't even do it, right? And so this year, then, they're really, really careful about it. And it's in select stores and it's only online. And again, they're a corporation, they have a right to do that. But if you want, I basically said to them, if you want to be our corporate ally and really celebrate Pride with us, then be in it 100%, damn the torpedoes. And don't just do it because you think it's a business opportunity. Because to me, that's what I call rainbow washing. Like, you know, just slapping a rainbow on something and saying, oh, look at us, we're an ally. What I was shocked about with Target, and I continue to be, is they're super smart and they have a really good communications and PR team, and they weren't ready for the backlash. Like, I was so surprised that they weren't ready. And again, we live in a polarized country. I love Pride Month. I want Pride Month to be authentic. And so if you can't be in it with us, regardless of what happens, then don't do it. And I also don't think it should be cause of the month. You know, it shouldn't go from like Black History Month to AAPI Month to Pride Month to Breast Cancer Awareness Month. Like that's not what we need. Like I think all communities and causes need 12-month-a-year allies. And that's really what I want from Target. And by the way, I think, again, for their employees, they're a really good company, and they're always one of the top-ranked companies to work for if you're LGBTQ, and they have amazing benefits. But they forgot about their employees, and I told them that. When you do that with the product, you're actually marginalizing your employees and making them feel bad about themselves too, which is a little bit about how I felt with the Don't Say Gay with Disney. You know, Disney is the largest private employer in Florida. They have incredible political weight. I mean, the tax revenue and everything else. And if you think about Disney, which has almost 200,000 employees, even if you use the 10%, that means 20,000 of their employees are LGBTQ. What message are you sending to your employees if you back down and accept that Don't Say Gay bill? You know, that's really what my message has been for Target.
Economic argument anyway?
Yeah, I mean, I think no retailer, publicly traded company, is going to do Pride apparel if they don't think it's going to sell. They're not charities, right? So they're doing it for economic reasons. And we have LGBTQ community and our allies have tremendous spending power. And so when we support somebody, we support people. We're also really good at boycotts. Any of you from the community may remember when we didn't eat Chick-fil-A and we didn't drink Coors beer and we didn't go to Hobby Lobby. When we organize, we organize. And I never wanted to see the queer community boycott Target. There was talks of that, for sure, in our community, because I felt like Target had a 20-year history we had to honor. Pride this year has been very odd, though. Starbucks has pulled back. And then other people have gone stronger. Ironically, Walmart has been really prideful. And there's a Pride collect. And Walmart, I always thought is more conservative than Target. But Walmart has done national television advertising. It's in all their stores. It's in all of their e-commerce. They've got a really nice Pride collection this year at Walmart. So it's just kind of interesting.
So I'm sorry, I haven't read your book, but
Sure.
I was very interested in what you have to say. I came from retail.
Yeah.
And so that was my question. So you probably came out before you went to work in retail. No?
I came out. I wasn't out at Dayton Hudson.
Oh.
I came out personally. This is interesting. I came out personally before I went to work, but I was in the closet in the first job. And then when I went to Gap, I interviewed as an out gay man. Exactly. Yeah. And so, yeah.
So that was really my question, just even before
Yeah.
coming. It's like, to me, the retail business is the most gay friendly. I mean,
It
to
is.
me, I was in
Retail, for
retail
sure.
for a very long time, and I mean, everybody knew who was out, and
Yeah.
everybody
Yeah.
knew who was gay, whether they said it or not,
Yeah.
and they were fantastic, and
Yeah.
they were talented and creative, and
Yeah.
so I was kind of trying to get you've got this really lovely, and I guess it's the all pride thing,
Yeah,
approach to who you are,
yeah.
but it seems like there might have been some really good stuff in retail.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, that was like a highlight place.
For sure. I mean, I think there's definitely industries that are more LGBTQ friendly, retail, art, design, real estate. I think being on this journey I'm on, like, I think banking is still hard for a lot of people, investment banking, legal, ironically, like there's some great firms that are good with legal and others that aren't. So, but yeah, I think I kind of fell into an industry that did welcome me, and I could see people like me, again, representation matters, who were higher up, right? But what I wasn't seeing, and I think this is one of the issues we're still working on today, I wasn't seeing it in the C-suite. Like there was like a rainbow ceiling, like there was, like you'd see VPs or maybe SVPs, but I wasn't seeing them running divisions or running the company. It's changing. It's definitely changed over the last 35, 40 years, but for sure.
The department stores were better actually than Disney,
Oh, yeah, for
That
sure.
Disney, I'm from LA, so.
Yeah,
I know
yeah,
Disney
yeah.
they're very conservative.
Fair.
Yeah, I mean, they're better now, but they were.
Well, and I think it's better, unfortunately, when the Disney family was involved, the Disney family themselves was very conservative, including Walt. And now that there's not really any Disneys, I mean, they own stock, but they're not really in operating roles anymore. I think the company is modernized. And I do think a lot of companies, even regardless of the size, do reflect their C-suite and their board of directors. And Bob Iger, who's the head of return as the CEO, is personally committed to social justice in general, right? It's not that he's just an ally. And I think the people around him are. I think he's created a board of directors that's about belonging and inclusion. And that's where the culture starts. Yes.
So I was wondering, 20 more summers,
Yeah.
what's coming?
That's such a great question. Yeah. Well, I mean, again, I'm in this pivot. So I'm finishing up a couple big consulting clients that'll end August, September, October this year. In July, I'm going back to Emory. I live in Atlanta, and I'm going to their graduate school, the Goizetta Graduate School, to get 2 certificates in executive coaching. I want to go into executive coaching. And I kind of do that already. And like people say, oh, you coach and you mentor, but I want the education. I want to learn. I want to study. Book 2 and book 3 are kind of in germination, and I'm writing a lot of notes, and I'll probably start writing book 2 January, February-ish. So maybe I'll get it out in 26 if I'm really good. And then I got picked up by a speaking bureau, which I didn't even really knew existed. I'm with this incredible speaking bureau called Collective Speakers, and their entire roster of speakers is DEI and inclusion. Taraji P. Henson, not that I'm anywhere like Taraji, but she's in Collective Speakers, and Common, and some just incredible. It's all about diversity and marginalized communities, and I'm getting corporate speaking gigs. So like I'm doing Levi Strauss, I'm doing Salesforce. A lot of times it's the pride groups, but I'm also starting to talk to C-suites and like HR departments and things like that. So, and I'm getting married again, which when you read the book, you'll never believe I'm getting married again. I think I'm still shocked. We're getting married in September of 25. And so I'm really going to try and be a great spouse. He's incredible. He's a doctor. Like what he does really is important. I say all the time, like I used to make jokes. I don't make it anymore, but when we were in retail, I used to literally, I would say to people, it's not like we're doing brain surgery, right? Like, oh my God, the blouse didn't sell, right? Oh my God, they don't like pink, right? And I literally would joke horribly. It's not like brain surgery. Well, now I'm marrying a pediatric emergency room doctor who like fixes things and saves lives and gunshot wounds and stuff, so I've stopped saying that. But it's great because our professional lives have nothing to do with each other. But I keep saying, like, I'm ready to be the doctor's wife, basically. And like, one of my favorite movies is Far From Heaven, if you know that movie with Julianne Moore. And I basically think of myself as her. Like, I'm like the 50s housewife. Like, but I really want to be out on the road doing this kind of stuff. But I'm ready to support somebody else.
You've done a lot, so.
I'm ready. Yes.
I started my career in retail too, so.
Yeah, a lot of people did.
As you tell these stories, I worked for Lerner, which is at the
Yes.
New York and Company. There was a Disney store right next to us. There
Yes.
was a Claire's a couple doors down, and
Yes.
a Gap right across the street.
Yeah. You were in the neighborhood,
Right.
yeah, for sure.
Right, so I started off in retail, and now I work in human resources.
Yeah.
And so I've heard you make a couple of references to human resources. Some of them made me cringe, and
Yeah.
I'm sorry that you had that experience, but just wondering, do you have any recommendations on what human resources can do to get it right? I feel like our employees can be our best recruiters,
Yes.
but it's gonna be based on the stories that they tell. So how can we support
love
those
that.
who are showing up as our authentic selves?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it, honestly, is I totally believed in the HR function, and I always made sure that the head of HR reported directly to me. And as you know, in a lot of corporations, they don't. A lot of times they report to like the COO or the CFO, but I really believed in like that chief people officer kind of title. Like I saw HR as a C-suite direct report to me as the president or CEO role, because I believe I'm servant leadership, I'm authentic leadership. I truly believe the people are the gasoline in the engine that make everything happen, and that it's my job as a leader and the people around me to create safe, inclusive, respectful environments where people get to be their best selves. And I'm a capitalist. Like I wanted to make my goals, but my belief was if I did that, people would then work their best for me, and my recruiting would be easier, my retention would go up. You know, if you're in HR, retention's a huge problem. Turnover is a huge problem. Expensive, you have to retrain, all that. And then I'd be able to promote from within and all those things you want to do. And so one of the great things at working for Disney, even though they're a big corporation, is we would do culture surveys, we would measure ourselves. And tools that I had at Disney that I think not every company uses is culture surveys and measure themselves year over year. 360 reviews were huge for me at many points in my career, to get that honest feedback from employees and supervisors and peers. But I think first it's like get the proverbial seat at the table and have a leader, a president, a CEO, whatever, who believes in people the same way that they believe in finance. Right? The same way that they believe in legal, right? Of course you need a good general counsel. Of course you need a good CFO. And I think the war for talent is real, particularly spending time again on college campuses. If you spend time with people under 30 right now, if you don't give them what they want, they're just gonna go look for it somewhere else. I mean, or they'll just go start their own thing. They'll go become like a TikTok creator, or, they'll just do a startup. So I think so much of it starts with the leadership saying, people are valuable, and I want to create the best for them. And it's funny, you know this being in HR. I'm a perfect example of it in my story. People don't leave companies because of the benefits or pay. There's so much about this. They leave because of the culture and their boss. And I think that is something that we need to talk about more. We need to tell that story more. Like everybody thinks, oh, I'm just going to pay him or her more, or I'm going to give them mental health benefits, or I'm going to give them childcare benefits. That's not why people leave. They leave because they don't feel valued. They leave because they don't feel psychologically or physically safe. And they leave because their boss doesn't make them feel valued, and I think we have to say that more. Sure. Yes.
As someone who has worked in retail and other.
Oh my God, we need to have a retail support group.
and other various
Yeah.
crap jobs over the years.
Yes.
Do you, as an upper echelon person, feel that customer service can be trained, or is it instinctive?
That's a great question. I would not to do a pat answer. I think it's a little bit of both. I think there's some people who are naturally better at it. It's a little bit, I would be honest, extrovert, introvert, a little bit, right? Like, when I was running Disney Store, and knowing you were at Lerner, I was always looking for people who wanted to do customer service and experience. I didn't want clerks, and I think you know what I say. Like, a clerk is the person that works at the grocery store, and you put your stuff on the thing, and they ring you up, and they say, that's $112, and do you have a loyalty card, right? And maybe they smile at you when maybe they put your stuff in a bag. Sometimes they don't even do that. To me, that's clerking. It's very transactional. I wanted storytellers. I wanted people who were brand ambassadors. We had an interview protocol to try and bring that out of people. Like, our best people at Disney Store, most of our people were part-time that worked in the stores, and no surprise, our best cast members, we called them cast members at Disney Store, were moms who wanted to work part-time, preschool teachers, theater people, people who've been in theater, because we were telling a story, we were creating a moment. But we had training for that too. So I thought we could bring it out of people. But I do think in Disney Store, there needed to be some natural talent there that we could pull out. If you wanted to sit, like, we would interview people, and if it felt like they wanted to clerk, I'd say, I don't think this is the right place for you. But maybe Kroger is, right? Or something like that. No, I mean, it's okay. Not everybody has the same skills. Yeah, no, it's different. And by the way, as a customer, I have different expectations. I have completely different expectations of going into a Disney Store than I do of going into a Kroger. It's different mindset. A lot of times in Kroger, I want to get in and out, right? Our Kroger in the South is Publix. Many of you probably know that. Like, so I love Publix, but I want to get in and out. I know what I want. I don't really need to be schmoozed when I'm in Publix. If I'm in Disney Store, I kind of like the schmoozing. I like the service. Or, a department store, or if I'm buying clothing or I'm buying a gift for somebody, I actually like service. Oh, yeah. One more? 2 more or 2 more? Okay. Yes.
So what do you think future retail is? Because retail is, I mean, we're in this existential moment that's been coming for 20 years, but now it's like really getting
Yeah, I mean, I think.
And I just want, I'm following up on the cast member and because that is the kind of shopping that people want to do, and that is what's going away. Everything's becoming very transactional, and along the lines of being trained. When you go to the bank and they go, "Oh, I love your glasses," it's just like somebody told them to say, "Oh, I love your glasses." So
it's funny. And optimistic, pessimistic, realistic. Like, it's interesting. Like, Walgreens and Walmart just announced that they're removing all their self-checkout lanes and going back at least to clerking, right? So, right, because shrinkage, but that means they're gonna have to hire people to actually clerk again, right? It's funny, moving to Atlanta's still new to me, but one of the things that struck me in Atlanta was this resurgent of like mom and pop specialty stores. Like, there's still areas in Atlanta where you go and there's like 7 or 8 stores next to it. There'll be like a bookstore and a shoe store and a pet store, and they're like mom and pop owned, and like that pride of shopkeepers. So I was like, oh, like I actually love that. And I just went to Europe for the first time since the pandemic. And Paris and London, I had some incredible shopping experiences, right? And so I was like, I think, unfortunately, the answer for most retailers, and it's expensive, is you have to be digital and physical. You don't have a choice. Because, by the way, all the brands that I love, I will shop them digitally and physically. Sometimes I want digital because I know exactly what I want, and then other times I want to just go in and explore. But I'm hopeful there's a return to service and experiential. It won't be what it was in the 60s and 70s with the department stores and everything. I don't think we're ever going to go all the way back there, but I think it'll be a blend, a hybrid. Okay, and you get the last question because I saw your hand, sorry.
So I was wondering if you could speak to creating space for representation in adversity.
Yeah, it's tough, right? I mean, like the first lesson in the book is control the controllable, but leave space for the possible, right? So I think one of the things, again, I said it earlier, with aging comes wisdom, is you have to accept small victories. Like, it's not a light switch where all of a sudden you're like, whoops, I flipped on the light and I've got this safe, inclusive environment. A lot of times it's really incremental. It's small movements, but I think part of what, again, I'm trying to create is if I'm authentic and I try to attract people around me who are authentic, like you're gonna start to feel it. And it's funny, again, I mean, poor Atlanta. You know, I lived in California for almost 25 years. I lived in San Francisco, LA, and Laguna Beach. Like, I basically lived in gay land, right? But not only gay land, like, I just assumed everybody was an ally, right? I just assumed, and by the way, there's tons of non-allies there, but I just was kind of Mary Poppinsing through life, like, ooh, everybody's happy. Moving to Georgia was shocking, where all of a sudden I had to put my gaydar on again, right? And I had to like read rooms, and I had to be like, is that restaurant, is this a friendly restaurant or an unfriendly restaurant? And you know, every group I went into, it was like a new group, it was like coming out again, like inviting in again. Then I fell in love with a black man. So I was like, okay, let's put some more targets on us. Not only are we gay, we're an interracial couple, right? And that's been a whole new experience for me of like seeing life through his eyes, right? And how I drive at night, right? Like, he never drives at night. We've had this situation. We've had a pullover, which went differently when I was in the seat than when he was in the seat, right? So I've lived that. So I think, but it never, like, again, I feel like I'm supposed to be in Georgia right now. I feel like I'm supposed to be having these conversations and representing in Georgia. And, you know, even in voting, I tell this story. I've lived in Georgia 3 years. I voted for Reverend Raphael Warnock 4 times because he's had runoffs both times, right? And he's won the second runoff by 11,000 votes. And I know who like 20 of those votes were, because it was like our friends and family, and we went together to vote in the runoff. So I feel like it's about managing your expectations and appreciating small incremental changes. Because if you're looking for the big sweeping moment, you tend to be disappointed, you know. And I think within our own community, and this last thing I'll say, because I know we're in time, is I think even within our own queer community, we need to have more dialogues, because there's microaggressions within our own community. We don't understand each other. I know a lot of gay men my age who do not understand the trans community at all, and don't honestly want to know. Think that they have their own issues. And I'm like, they are us. Like, stop, right? Like, if we have microaggressions in our own community, no wonder the far right can come after us. So I think we have to constantly educate ourselves and be willing to have open and honest dialogues, and sometimes have uncomfortable conversations. Great, thank you guys so much.
Well, thank you so much for coming and talking with us. Thank you, audience. Wonderful questions.
Right, I'll go over there to sign.
Yes, we have some books.
Don't watch me get off the stage, because I look like I'm 100. I look like my grandfather.
Can you tell them this, how we're set up here, signing?
Yes, and so there are books over here where Jim is going to be doing the signing, and there are beverages at that table, and then back there will be food. So please have some food and mingle if you have time.